The towering gates of the National Aquatic Training Facility loomed before Ethan, their sleek design an intimidating reminder of the challenge he was stepping into. He adjusted the strap of his duffel bag, his palms clammy despite the crisp morning air. "This is it," he thought, swallowing hard. "This is my fresh start." But the doubt lingered. He had fought tooth and nail to secure a spot on this team, and it wasn't just because of the competition. Ethan wasn't an ordinary diver. He was an Omega, and with that came both extraordinary potential and crippling disadvantages. He instinctively touched the scent suppressor patch beneath his shirt, a flimsy shield against his Omega pheromones, which had been both a curse and a source of ridicule throughout his career. His condition wasn't uncommon in the broader world, but in elite sports, Omegas were a rarity. Most Omegas avoided competitive arenas dominated by Alphas, where the clash of hormones could trigger anything from distraction to outright aggression. For Ethan, it had been worse. His pheromones were unusually potent, capable of disrupting even the most disciplined Alphas if unchecked. Growing up, it hadn't mattered much. As a child, his talent in gymnastics and diving had earned him trophies, applause, and admiration. But puberty changed everything. The onset of his Omega physiology turned every practice into a battleground, his mere presence inciting tension, jealousy, and outright hostility among his teammates. He'd tried everything: scent blockers, suppressors, even intensive training to control his natural emissions. But the stigma stuck. Coaches doubted his focus, competitors accused him of playing dirty, and teammates resented the complications he brought. Eventually, the pressure drove him away from the sport he loved. Now, as he stepped through the facility's glass doors, he couldn't help but feel the weight of those experiences. This wasn't just another team. It was his last chance to prove that he belonged here, that an Omega could stand shoulder to shoulder with Alphas in a sport as demanding as diving. Inside, the training facility was a symphony of activity. The rhythmic splash of water punctuated shouted instructions and the metallic clang of equipment being moved. Ethan took a deep breath, the faint sting of chlorine in the air grounding him. "Hey, new guy!" a sharp voice called out, breaking his concentration. Ethan turned to see a group of swimmers lounging near the pool. One of them, a tall Alpha with a cocky grin, was beckoning him over. Ethan hesitated, but walked toward them, clutching his bag like a lifeline. As he got closer, the first thing he noticed was the change in the air. Alphas had an innate ability to sense pheromones, and even with his suppressor patch, Ethan knew a trace of his scent might slip through. Sure enough, the Alpha's grin faltered, replaced by a furrowed brow. "Wait a minute." The ripple effect was immediate. The other Alphas in the group stiffened, their easygoing camaraderie dissolving into tension. One swimmer outright recoiled, muttering something under his breath. Another glared at Ethan like he'd brought a storm cloud into their sanctuary. "Is that an Omega?" someone whispered. "Yeah," another voice answered, louder this time. "What the hell is he doing here?" Heat rose to Ethan's cheeks. His grip tightened on his bag, nails digging into the canvas. He'd expected some resistance, but facing it head-on still stung. Before the situation could escalate further, a sharp whistle sliced through the air. "Enough!" barked Coach Bennett, his voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The swimmers fell silent, turning toward the wiry man striding across the pool deck. The coach's eyes narrowed as he surveyed the group. "What's going on here?" One of the swimmers, a broad-shouldered Alpha, stepped forward. "Coach, no offense, but—" "Save it," Coach Bennett interrupted. He gestured toward Ethan. "This is Ethan Lawson, your new teammate, and before any of you geniuses start questioning my decisions, let me remind you that I pick the roster, not you. Understood?" The swimmers exchanged uneasy glances, but didn't argue. Coach Bennett turned to Ethan, his expression softening just enough to ease the tension in Ethan's chest. "Welcome to the team," he said firmly. As the introductions continued, Ethan caught snippets of whispered conversations around him. "An Omega? Seriously?" What's next? Hiring a beta for the sprint team? Hope he doesn't make us lose focus during practice. Ethan tried to block out the noise, focusing instead on the coach's instructions. But one voice, sharper and more cutting than the rest, broke through his defenses. "This is ridiculous," the voice said. Ethan turned to see Aiden Hart, the team's star diver, standing with his arms crossed. Aiden was the picture of athletic perfection, broad shoulders, sculpted muscles, and a jawline that looked like it had been carved from marble, but his piercing blue eyes were cold as they raked over Ethan. "Great," Aiden said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Just what we need, a walking distraction." Ethan felt a flicker of anger rise in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "I'm here to compete, not to distract anyone," he said, meeting Aiden's gaze head-on. Aiden raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Compete? With what, your pheromones? Let's hope you don't throw off everyone's focus when it actually matters." Before Ethan could respond, Coach Bennett's voice cut in. "That's enough, Hart. If you've got a problem, take it up with me after practice." Aiden held Ethan's gaze for a moment longer before shrugging and turning away. "Whatever," he muttered. Later, as the team gathered for the day's schedule, Coach Bennett made an announcement. "We've been approached by a sponsor for a promotional campaign," he said. "They want 2 athletes to represent the team in a series of events leading up to the national championship." The swimmers perked up, interest flickering across their faces. "The representatives will be Hart and Lawson," the coach continued. Aiden's head snapped toward the coach. "What?" he said, his voice laced with disbelief. "You heard me," the coach said firmly. "Hart, you're one of our top divers, and Lawson has the potential to bring something unique to the table. You'll work together on this. End of discussion." Ethan felt Aiden's glare burning into the side of his face, but he kept his expression neutral. He wouldn't let Aiden, or anyone else, see how nervous he was. As the team dispersed, Ethan lingered by the edge of the pool, staring at his reflection in the water. His heart raced with a mix of anxiety and determination. This wasn't going to be easy, but he'd come too far to back down now. Ethan stood on the diving platform, his arms crossed tightly across his chest. His skin prickled under the scrutiny of the other athletes, but one glare felt sharper than the rest, Aiden's. "Come on, Lawson," Aiden barked from below, standing by the poolside with a clipboard. "You've been up there long enough to grow roots. Dive already!" Ethan gritted his teeth, his muscles tense. The pressure of being paired with Aiden was unbearable enough without the endless stream of condescending remarks, but he couldn't afford to falter. Not now, not ever. Taking a deep breath, Ethan closed his eyes and focused on the routine drilled into him since childhood. His body flowed into motion, arms outstretched, legs straight, toes pointed, as he leapt into the air. The water welcomed him with a splash so clean it barely rippled the surface. As he surfaced, gasping for air, he scanned the edge of the pool. The other swimmers wore expressions ranging from mild interest to apathy, but Aiden was already writing notes, not even looking at him. "Not bad," Aiden muttered, barely loud enough for Ethan to hear. "For a beginner." The comment stung, but Ethan bit back a retort. He wasn't about to let Aiden's arrogance throw him off his game. The team moved on to synchronized diving drills. Ethan and Aiden, as the coach's chosen pair for the upcoming promotional campaign, were tasked with demonstrating the basics. "You lead," Aiden said flatly, climbing the ladder to the 10-meter platform. Ethan followed, suppressing a surge of nerves. He had practiced synchrony before, but never with someone like Aiden, someone whose reputation as a perfectionist preceded him. They stood side by side at the edge, the world below blurring into shades of blue and white. "On my count," Aiden said. 3, 2, 1. They dove. The air rushed past Ethan's ears as he twisted and flipped, hyper-aware of his movements. When they hit the water, the impact felt perfect, a harmonious splash. Ethan surfaced, his heart pounding with exhilaration. For a moment, silence stretched across the pool. Then came a smattering of applause from the other swimmers. "Did you see that?" one swimmer whispered. "The new guy's actually good." Ethan's chest swelled with pride. He glanced at Aiden, hoping for even a flicker of acknowledgement, but Aiden's expression remained unreadable. "Lucky break," Aiden said, his voice laced with dismissal. The next drill involved individual dives. Ethan was determined to prove himself again, but as he climbed the ladder, he felt his suppressor patch shift slightly beneath his shirt. Stay in place, he thought, silently willing the patch to hold. Ethan's dive was flawless, clean, precise, and technically advanced. As he resurfaced, the murmurs of approval around the pool grew louder. But his triumph was short-lived. "Ugh, what's that smell?" The voice came from another alpha swimmer who staggered backward, his eyes narrowing in Ethan's direction. Ethan's heart sank as he realized what had happened. His suppressor patch had come loose, allowing his pheromones to seep into the air. "Are you kidding me?" the alpha growled, his pupils dilating with aggression. "You're throwing us off on purpose." Ethan raised his hands in a placating gesture. "It was an accident, I swear." But the alpha lunged forward, his fists clenched. Before Ethan could react, a firm hand grabbed his arm and yanked him out of the way. He stumbled, turning to see Aiden standing between him and the angry swimmer. "Back off," Aiden said coldly. The other swimmer hesitated, his body trembling with barely restrained fury. After a tense moment, the coach intervened, barking orders to defuse the situation. As the others returned to their drills, Aiden dragged Ethan to a quieter corner of the facility. "What the hell were you thinking?" Aiden snapped, his grip on Ethan's arm tight enough to hurt. Ethan yanked his arm free, glaring at him. "I wasn't thinking about anything. It was an accident. An accident that nearly got you hurt and distracted the entire team." Aiden's voice rose, drawing the attention of nearby swimmers. Ethan clenched his fists. "I didn't ask for this, okay? Do you think I want my condition to be a problem?" "Then control it," Aiden said through gritted teeth. "Or leave." Ethan's vision blurred with frustration. "I'm not leaving. I earned my spot here just like you did. Maybe instead of treating me like a liability, you could try being an actual teammate." Aiden's eyes narrowed, his jaw working as though he wanted to retort, but couldn't find the words. Ethan took a step closer, his voice trembling with emotion. "You don't know what it's like to constantly feel like you don't belong, to have to work twice as hard to be taken seriously. So don't stand there and act like you're better than me just because you were born an alpha." The raw honesty in Ethan's words seemed to catch Aiden off guard. For the first time, his usual arrogance softened into something unreadable. Later, as Aiden watched Ethan dive during the next drill, he found himself studying the Omega more closely. There was no denying Ethan's talent. His movements were fluid and precise, his dives executed with a natural grace that even seasoned athletes struggled to achieve. But what impressed Aiden most wasn't the skill. It was the determination in Ethan's eyes, the way he pushed himself despite the challenges stacked against him. Aiden folded his arms, leaning against the wall. He still didn't trust Ethan's ability to control his pheromones, but grudgingly, he had to admit that the Omega had potential. "Maybe he's not a total liability after all," Aiden muttered under his breath. The thought lingered as he turned his attention back to the pool, wondering if his initial judgment of Ethan had been too hasty. The muffled chatter of the team died down as Coach Rivera clapped his hands, commanding attention. Ethan stood near the back of the group, fidgeting with the straps of his swim bag, his stomach tightening with unease. "Listen up," Coach began, his voice firm. "I've made a decision about how we're moving forward with the training pairs." Aiden, standing a few feet away with his usual cool demeanor, barely glanced up from where he leaned against the wall. "Ethan and Aiden, you'll be training partners from now on," Coach announced. Ethan froze. His heart sank further when the team broke into murmurs. "What?" one of the swimmers muttered. "Why pair him with Aiden? He's the best we've got." Ignoring the murmurs, Coach continued, "This isn't negotiable. Aiden's unique immunity to Omega pheromones makes him the only viable partner for Ethan, and as top-tier athletes, you're expected to rise above your differences. I trust you'll make this work." Ethan's chest tightened. Immunity? He hadn't realized such a thing was possible, and though it explained why Aiden seemed unaffected by his pheromones, the knowledge didn't ease his anxiety. After practice, Ethan approached the coach hesitantly. "Coach Rivera, are you sure this is a good idea? I don't want to be a burden?" Coach cut him off, his tone stern but not unkind. "Ethan, you've got talent. I wouldn't have brought you onto this team if I didn't believe in you. Aiden's job is to bring out the best in you. Trust the process." Ethan nodded reluctantly, but doubt lingered in his mind. The next day, Ethan and Aiden met by the deep training pool for their first session as partners. "Don't expect me to hold your hand," Aiden said curtly, adjusting his goggles. "Don't worry, I wasn't planning on it," Ethan shot back, surprising himself with the bite in his tone. They started with underwater drills designed to simulate extreme conditions. Ethan struggled at first, his lungs burning as he fought to stay focused under the water's crushing pressure. Aiden, however, moved effortlessly, his strokes strong and precise as he circled back to guide Ethan through each set. "Stop fighting the current," Aiden said as Ethan surfaced, gasping for air. "Flow with it. Use its energy instead of wasting your own." Ethan wiped the water from his face, glaring at Aiden, but knowing he was right. He nodded and dove back in, this time following Aiden's movements more closely. As they progressed, Ethan began to find his rhythm. Aiden's presence, steady and unyielding, served as a stabilizing force, helping Ethan push through the drills. By the end of the session, Ethan collapsed onto the pool deck, exhausted but exhilarated. "You didn't completely suck today," Aiden said as he walked past, a hint of a smirk playing on his lips. Ethan blinked, unsure whether to take it as a compliment or an insult. The team gathered in the locker room after practice, and Ethan's temporary high was quickly dampened by the snide comments that floated through the air. "Guess it must be nice having Aiden as your personal babysitter," one swimmer said loudly, glancing at Ethan. Ethan stiffened, his hands clenched into fists as laughter rippled through the group. "Maybe he should switch careers to Omega Management," another added, earning more chuckles. Ethan stood, his heart pounding. "Say that to my face," he snapped, his voice trembling with anger. The room fell silent for a moment, the other swimmers clearly not expecting a reaction. But before the tension could escalate further, Aiden stepped between Ethan and the rest of the group, his expression hard as steel. "Enough," Aiden said coldly, his voice cutting through the room like a knife. "You're all so concerned about my time? Maybe focus on improving your own performance instead of whining like amateurs." The swimmers exchanged uneasy glances before slinking away, leaving Ethan and Aiden alone in the now quiet locker room. "You didn't have to do that," Ethan muttered, staring at the floor. Aiden shrugged. "They're idiots. You're not." Ethan looked up, meeting Aiden's gaze. For a brief moment he thought he saw something different in Aiden's eyes, something softer, almost protective. Later that evening, as the sun set over the facility, Ethan found Aiden sitting by the edge of the pool, his feet dangling in the water. "Hey," Ethan said hesitantly, approaching him. "Thanks for earlier. I mean it." Aiden glanced at him, then back at the water. "Don't mention it." Ethan sat down beside him, the silence between them stretching out. "I don't get it," Ethan finally said. "Why do you even bother? I'm just—" He trailed off, unable to finish the thought. "You're just what?" Aiden asked, his tone challenging. Ethan swallowed hard. "A liability." Aiden let out a sharp breath, shaking his head. "You don't need to prove yourself to those idiots, or to me, for that matter. The only person you should be competing with is yourself." Ethan stared at him, surprised by the unexpected words of encouragement. "You've got potential, Lawson," Aiden continued, his voice softer now. "Stop wasting energy trying to win everyone over, and focus on becoming the best version of yourself." Ethan felt a strange warmth spread through his chest at Aiden's words. For the first time since joining the team, he didn't feel completely alone. As they sat in silence, the sound of water lapping against the pool's edge, Ethan realized that maybe, just maybe, Aiden wasn't as unapproachable as he seemed.